Well, good evening and thanks for joining us here on News 20 on GTN. I'm Randy Gardner. A great show for you tonight. When you see these two at the desk, joining me to my right, we have Karen McKay, the district lead for ACS Can. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, Randy. Thank you.
And to your right, we have Tim Freeman, the grassroots director of ACS Can. And we'll start with you tonight, Tim. We usually start with Karen, but you know, she'll take the whole show. So we'll start with you, Tim. Tell us, for the people who don't understand, we hear the American Cancer Society, we hear ACS Can. How are they cooperatively working together?
Yeah, great question. Thanks for having us, Randy. I appreciate it. Everybody has heard of the American Cancer Society, and usually when you think of the American Cancer Society, you think of Relay for Life. We have Relay for Life events all across the country. Pretty much everybody's heard of Relay for Life, and that's what they associate the American Cancer Society with. A little over 10 years ago or so, the folks at the American Cancer Society started to realize that legislative issues were just as important in the fight against cancer as raising funds through the American Cancer Society and providing the services that ACS provides. And so they set up the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network, or ACS Can as we call it. And it's basically the advocacy affiliate of the American Cancer Society, which allows us to reach out directly to elected officials at the local, state, and federal level to help influence them, educate them about issues related to the fight against cancer, and then to get them to vote accordingly to help us move the fight against cancer along legislatively.
Now, you have a trip coming up in September to go to Washington to talk to some of the legislators about this. I think most people, when they think of the Cancer Society, they think of money being raised by the general public. But with this organization, it kind of turns the tables and makes that legislative side so much more important.
Exactly. The American Cancer Society is the #2 funder of cancer research in the entire country. The only entity that funds cancer research at a higher level is the federal government. So the American Cancer Society raises hundreds of millions of dollars for cancer research. The federal government funds it in the billions. And so what we do with ACS Can on the federal level is, and when we go next month to Washington, D.C., we'll be talking to our senators and our members of Congress about continuing that funding for cancer research. As you know, there are cuts in the federal budget all the time, and we understand that, but what we want is for them to make sure that cancer funding is a priority and it's not one of the things that gets cut.
Now, we're going to talk much more about this in a few minutes with Tim, but Karen, you jokingly say you're a cheerleader for this, but I know you do much more than that. Talk about the importance of people like yourself being involved with this on the community level to make this a reality so you and Tim and other members can go and talk to the legislators.
We do have an opportunity to contact people through a lot of different organizations, through schools, through business associations, through local groups, that we really are a voice. You know, if I want to equate something, you know, when you're talking to your legislators, you know, they're listening to us, especially if we're sending in letters and phone calls and that, and we have issues that come down through the pike through the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network, maybe an alarm to say, hey, this bill is going to be on the floor, we really need you, and we need you as somebody that can give some input. You know, I equate it as maybe looking at a stadium of nice, loud, roaring, you know, stadium, and all of a sudden it goes silent. You know, if it goes silent, then your legislators think, well, maybe it's not important. I equate us as a group in that stadium as cheerleaders, and that's why I say I feel that I'm a cheerleader because I have a voice and I understand some of the legislation coming down, and it's important that our legislators get that information so they know when a bill comes forward that those dollars that Tim was talking about that comes from the federal government that trickle down to Missouri and then to our local, you know, hospitals and that those dollars come from the federal government, which is about 80% of the funding that's needed for the National Institute of Health, the Centers for Disease Control, and the Cancer Institute.
What would you say to people out there watching tonight who are sitting on their couch saying, well, I'm just one person. How does my one voice, getting involved with the organization, make a difference?
You know, everybody has been, in some way in their life, has been touched by cancer. You have, I have, Tim. You know, I don't think that we can walk this earth the older we get and more people that are living longer, we're finding that are contracting cancer. I just look at it as, I started out when I started working with the American Cancer Society and the National Cosmetology Association through my business maybe 30 some odd years ago to help with the Look Good Feel Better program, and then that just revolves. You know, you kind of get caught up in trying to do something on a charitable side, And then the Relay for Life started here in North County, which you, again, were a huge proponent of keeping it going. It's contagious, you know. If you have a way, you have a voice, you have, maybe you don't want to do like us and go and speak to legislators, but you can get involved, like in your Relay for Lives or making strides against breast cancer. There's all kinds of ways, especially with the American Cancer Society. They have a litany of things that you can get involved in.
Tim, when you go to a place like Washington, D.C., and you go up with the power of the people behind you, what kind of reception do you receive from the legislators?
It's fantastic. When these folks like Karen and the others, I mean, they give up their time to go to Washington, D.C. or to come to Jeff City or even on local issues. When we walk into a member's office in Washington, D.C. and we tell the stories that our volunteers have to tell, these cancer stories, these personal stories. You know, Karen mentioned, and a lot of times we hear people when they talk about cancer, they say, we've been touched by cancer. And I heard one of our volunteers at a meeting I was at earlier this year say, you know, I wasn't touched by cancer, I was punched by cancer, and I want to punch back. And so when we go into these offices and we tell these stories, the legislators, they really do listen, and it makes a difference. You know, there's a difference between what Karen and our other volunteers do as volunteers and what maybe a lobbyist might do. And people sometimes get a bad connotation of lobbyists and what a lobbyist is. These folks are volunteers that take from their own time to go talk, and when they share their stories and the passion that they have because it's something that's real to them, it really resonates with these folks. And back to your original question is, you know, when one person's sitting there thinking, what can I really do? Can I really make a difference? I can tell you, this lady right here has made a difference, and she's one person, and the more folks that we can get to be involved like that, the more of a difference we can make.
In terms of walking into one of the offices, kind of walk us through that situation. I know you sit down, you tell personal stories.
Right.
Do you have a petition with names on it so they can actually see it's not these volunteers who are just sitting here, it's thousands and tens of thousands of people in that community that are speaking this one voice?
We do. Karen talked about alerts, email alerts that we can send out, and we'll collect information on that. We have different events throughout the year, Relay for Life events and different things, and we have petitions that people can sign there. For instance, we have one that says, we support a federal increase for money to go toward cancer research. And we'll collect all those, and we'll make sure that we, you know, the ones when we go visit with Congressman Clay, we'll put all the ones from his district together, and we'll give those to him. And Karen can say, you know, I'm not only here speaking for myself, but I'm speaking for all these other folks from your district, and we have other folks that have sent in emails, and we can give him the numbers of folks that have joined ACS Can just from his district and let him know that all of those folks, that Karen's there speaking for all of those folks back in his district.
What have you traditionally seen through the years? Let's maybe start 5, 10 years back to now, and what do you see for the future? I mean, we talk about these cuts in fundings nationally.
Right.
Is this something that's affecting cancer research when it's such a national epidemic?
It is. It affects it greatly because research is not something that can just stop in the middle and wait for funding a year from now and then pick it right back up where you were. Funding has to continue, or research has to continue all the way through and to the end. If there's a stop in research in the middle due to lack of funds, that earlier research is pretty much gone, and they have to start all over. And so that's why we make sure that our members of Congress know you need to continue to fund these so that research can go forward. And then the other aspect of that I think is just as important to our legislators is the economic impact that that has. When those federal dollars come back here to St. Louis U or to Wash U or other Missouri universities, that's an economic engine for our state, and it's something that's very important for the entire state of Missouri. So it's not just the federal funds that are coming and fighting cancer, which is great, but it's also an economic engine for Missouri as well.
And we've got some pictures and stuff, Karen, you're gonna hold up. You're wonderful at documenting everything that goes on. But when you go to Washington in September, is this just a St. Louis contingent, a Missouri contingent, or is this a nationwide contingent on the Capitol?
From Missouri, we will have one volunteer from each of our congressional districts, and then one volunteer who will meet with both of our senators. In fact, all of the volunteers that will go will meet with both of our senators, Senator McCaskill and Senator Blunt, but then they will have volunteers from every state in the country. So every congressional member and every senator will be met by a volunteer from every state across the country. So the 435 members of the House and the 100 senators will have 535 volunteers that will be there to meet with all of those folks, plus staff from around the country as well. So we're gonna have a big mass, and we all have our blue shirts that we wear when we go up to the Hill, and so when we're walking through the halls and we're walking around Capitol Hill, they know that the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network is there.
How emotional is that for you, Karen, being, you know, like myself and Tim, you know, firsthand touched with this?
You know, there have been a couple of meetings that we have different ones of us that go in and we speak. You know, we usually, one person will introduce ourselves, the other one will kind of tell a story. Excuse me, again, my allergies. And then there's somebody that will basically leave some information and make sure that that legislator knows that we're going to be following up within a few days, even before we leave Washington, and then when we get back, to make sure that the legislative asks that we've asked are going to be followed up on. There's been a couple of times, and it's difficult because you know, and I know several people in the community, young and old, that have not won their battle with cancer. And again, when I try to tell the story on some of the people that I've had, you know, connections with, or even my own mother, it brings back that time frame, and it kind of flashes before you. Sometimes you have to put yourself in check for a second, but everybody in that room, including the legislators, understand. You know, when you're telling your story, or you're telling a story about somebody who's gone through a clinical care research, you know, and they've survived, and those dollars made a difference, it's uplifting. It's uplifting. But it can be sad too. But on the other hand, we're there for a purpose, and that purpose is to tell the story of the people that are in that congressional district.
As far as some of the documents you have here, let's hold up a few. And I know you spend a lot of time doing this, and I think the visual aspects really make a lot of visual influence on people when they see some of the things that you put together and have done in the community.
Well, you're familiar with the luminarias that we do during the Relay for Life. Those are bags that are sold in memory or in honor of somebody who is either battling cancer or somebody who has lost their battle with cancer. A few years ago, when we were in Washington, since we're around the beautiful reflection pool on the National Capitol, we decided to do kind of the same kind of an event, and it has spiraled. Tim knows the numbers. I have no idea what they are, but last year, I got involved with it and sent out my letter that I do for requests for some funding, and had a phenomenal return from the people that I solicited with that letter. And then I spent time, I didn't realize how much I was going to get back, but I spent time putting together bags. And last year, I put together some bags of just the ones that, just a few people, you know, that I'll let you put that up.
There you go.
Okay,
Hold them up
here we
right
go.
there.
All
There
right.
you go.
These are some of the bags, just from some people that I knew that had lost their battle with cancer. And this went on the Congressional Mall during that ceremony. This year, they decided to do this again. It's kind of towards the end of our time there. And I made a few more bags. And of course, there's some people you might even recognize in here that have been stricken by cancer this year. And a good friend of ours, young lady, again, you know, cancer knows no age. This is Kathy and Ron Schmidt's daughter, Amy, who's also a hairdresser here in North St. Louis County. And she's just finished up with her chemotherapy, her treatment, and her surgery, and she is on the road to recovery, not needing any more treatment. So we got that good news the other day. But, you know, I'll make these bags for as many people that want to support that. And again, when we're there, it seems like year after year, there's always something that happens. And, you know, during the Relay for Life, we have people that show up. And when they show up, I ask for their picture. We did Picture Cure. We have different things that we do at different events. And I put this book together basically to show our legislators that these are faces of people that live in this community. These are the faces of the people that have either won their battle with cancer, are still fighting it, or have lost their battle. And again, sometimes it's good for visuals. I started out with our first year in 2002, our first trip to Washington. If I go through all of this, Randy, it'll flip the whole half hour. Yeah. But these pages are the pages of all of the events that we've been to in Washington, and all of the times that we were there speaking in for the voice of our communities and telling the stories of things that were going on back in our districts, and making sure that our legislators had it and they got it. They saw that we were there for a purpose, not just to walk around in the reflection pool in Memorial, but we were there to make sure that they put cancer a national priority.
When there's so many organizations fighting for that almighty dollar, How do you set yourself apart from other organizations when you go to an event like this?
I think the American Cancer Society itself has done a great job in that, branding themselves. I think if you look at any lists that show the top 10 nonprofit organizations across the country, not only in raising funds, but the ones that are the most trusted, the American Cancer Society is right at the top there. So we walk in with legitimacy right there because of the American Cancer Society and the great work that they've done, the breakthroughs they've had. They've funded, you know, between 20 and 30 Nobel Prize winners on research. They've had some great accomplishments on the research side. And so when we go in to talk to them about that, because of the great work that the folks at the American Cancer Society have done, the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network, we have that credibility when we walk in the office.
There's not many of us in life who can say that, wow, we really are making a huge impact when we go home at night and lay down in people's lives. When you see all these pictures in this book, both yourself and Karen, and know that what you do on a daily basis is helping put these people in the book, save lives, how does that make you feel?
It's amazing. You know, those pictures in there could be people that I know. They're people that you know. Everybody that's watching the show could probably fill a book like that with people that they know, and it's a domino effect. So when you look back and you think, I went to Washington, D.C., I spoke with these elected officials, and you think for just a second, did it really make a difference? And then when Karen opens that book and you think back, it feels great. It's, as Karen said, it can get emotional as well.
And Karen, yourself, I know you've spent countless hours, days, weeks, months, years, if you put all your time together that you work on this stuff and have been involved with it. Is it more than you expected when you started, and once you got into it, you just couldn't get away from it?
You know, after being involved with the Relay for Life for the beginning of it when we started in 1998 here in North St. Louis County, which you were there, and you're still there. He's our media chair, by the way, for the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network. But, you know, starting early on with the Relay, I thought I was working my took-us off back in those days because we had some pretty good sized events, and it took a village. It took all of the people that were involved in our area to get involved and be out there, and I thought, boy, that was tiring. And then I got a phone call and asked, well, you know what, would you like to pass the baton and now get involved in advocacy as somebody that was involved with local legislation, you know, as a council person at the time. I thought, why not? You know, I do this on a local level, it's got to be a piece of cake. Little did I know when I realized that there were, you know, 600,000–700,000 people in this district, and that I would be going and speaking directly with our legislators at their local offices, going to Jefferson City, and boy, when we go to Jeff City, that's a powerhouse. You know, they leave me kind of to myself because I know so many of our legislators here, and they just give me the material and say run. But it's a good thing because it's the feedback that I get from residents, from my clientele, from people that I work with the Look Good, Feel Better program, and just with people in general, is, you know, don't let us just be one voice. You know, help us in this. You know, make some phone calls. We'll give you all the information today to get you to join with us in the forces, just to make those little phone calls and that. Voices and numbers speaks volumes.
How have you seen social media change this whole aspect of the American Cancer Society, and how it can influence legislators and just people in general to get the word out?
Yeah, absolutely. Whether it's email, which has been around for a while, but those direct contacts now for people, we try to make advocacy as easy as possible. Click of a mouse, put your information in, send the message to your elected officials. You don't have to pick up the phone or necessarily go to their office. You can do it that way. Obviously, Facebook is a huge way to do it. Twitter now. Legislators pay attention to those things. They follow those. They all have their own Facebook pages. They have their own websites that you can go on and you can correspond with them directly that way. So, and it helps us to grow our numbers as well, because people can, if they're on Facebook, they can just do a quick search for the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network Missouri, and our page will pop up and they'll get information, and they may even say, they may see a picture on there. Hey, I know that person. I didn't know they were affiliated with this. And they'll like our page, so that's great. The more folks that we can get that way, it's great. Going out to the relays and recruiting people that traditional way with handshakes and explaining to them what we do is great. But absolutely, social media has been a huge way for us to attract more people to our cause.
So the people who are watching tonight, if you had to say something to them about getting involved with this, what would you say to them? It's kind of an open blanket
Sure.
for you to throw it out there.
No, yeah, I would say to be an advocate, you don't have to be an expert. You just have to be passionate. And almost everybody is passionate about the fight against cancer. And we, like I said, we try to make advocacy as simple as we possibly can. And you can give as much time or as little time as you have. Karen gives a tremendous amount of time. She's collected the amount of money that she's raised just for these Lights of Hope is extraordinary. In fact, and she probably won't like me tooting her horn, but she has raised the most money of any volunteer across the entire country for the Lights of Hope this year. So my job becomes pretty easy when you have amazing volunteers like Karen. But what I would say to anybody is it can be a little amount of time, it can be a large amount of time. Just get involved because it does make a difference. That one phone call, that one email to a legislator's office could be the thing that tips the scale, and those are the things that we need. The more people we get, obviously, the larger our voice can be, but one person really can make a difference.
Do you find that sometimes it takes that personal connection, something happening in someone's family, whether it's to their family member or themselves, to really step up to the plate and become involved?
I've seen that happen over the last 30-some years that I've been involved with the American Cancer Society. There are some people, Randy, and I've told you this in the past, with the Look at Feel Better program, I have some people that do not want other people to know that they're going through the perils of cancer. And I have to respect that even before HIPAA and all the other sanctions that they put on us through all of the different, health background. But when I have somebody that says to me, I will never forget so-and-so. They had, we lost them from cancer. They get involved for a while, and sometimes maybe their healing process is to move on. Everybody does that on their own. I mean, I know you'll never forget your mom going through her treatment. I'll never forget the loss of my own mother and several young people that I became very close to. They continually keep me going forward. Every time I go to the relay and I see all of the survivors and I see all my friends that come in and I say, that's right, you had cancer once before. I forgot about that. You've been surviving how long now? Oh, 20 years, 25 years, That's what makes a big difference. That's what makes a difference.
Tim threw out a couple facts about you. I know you've got some facts that definitely there's probably some on that list that for the people who have not been touched that would really affect themselves, about the extraordinary amount of people who are actually touched by this firsthand.
Well, I know myself that in just the United States, just a couple of years ago when they put facts out there's almost 600,000 people a year that contract cancer. It's just there. And 50% of those can be, it don't have to be a death sentence. When you see people that contract cancer and then all of a sudden they get to their doctors and they get early detection, and that's again one of the big things that we work on is to make sure that those funds are there so people can get those early screenings, colon. And Randy, I've seen your programs time after time after time with all these different cancer groups. I mean, you put a face right here on your news channel to help us get the word out, to make sure that early screening is one of the things that's going to save your life. So those numbers, I could quote numbers every year because they're going down. It's like 30 years ago when somebody came in and said, I have cancer, I would swallow hard and say, okay, I'm going to do whatever I can to help you get through the process of your aesthetics. And now when somebody comes in, I don't say, hey, anything. I just say, okay, let's get started on a program for your skincare and for whatever's going to happen with your hair. And I'll be there walking right by your side and we'll get through this. It's a 68 to almost 70% survival rate for those that do early detection. And years out, they're finding those numbers are more and more and more. So when those dollars stop, like Tim said, when the federal funds, if they come to a rip-roaring halt, that's going to affect not only the federal government, but those trickle-down dollars that come back here to Missouri and then to our local hospitals and maybe some of our charitable, clinics and that. Those all have to come. That all goes downhill. That all goes downhill. So regardless, I'm going to Washington, and I'll continue to go to Washington as long as they'll have me to speak to the legislators and make them know that, it's so important that we keep all the funding where it needs to be.
Tim, the funding that comes down, that goes to research, to the universities, to the hospitals everywhere, does it blanket coverage, this might be a crazy question, but all cancers, or is it specifically looked at for one sort of cancer?
Yeah, it depends on the researcher. They'll apply to the NIH or the CDC for their specific research, or they can apply directly to the American Cancer Society as well. We fund a lot of cutting-edge research for the American Cancer Society. That's kind of our niche, is to find someone who the federal government may look at and say, well, you're not quite far enough down the road for us to provide this funding for you. We'll provide them the funding they need to get them to the next stage. So it depends on the specific work that that researcher's doing, but yes, everything from breast cancer to colon cancer, all types of different cancers, that funding can cover all of those.
The key here, and you said it earlier, and I thought it's a great point to make, is that there's so many charities out there that you can donate to, but it comes down to credibility. I think the people really trust and see what the American Cancer Society, ACS Can, is doing with their dollars and for the community.
Right, and we just last year celebrated our 100th birthday of the American Cancer Society. So that's 100 years of doing what's right, having the trust of the people to donate their time and their money to this amazing organization, and we'd like to continue to do that good work through ACS Can as well.
I guess the ultimate goal, and this might be the wrong thing to say, but the ultimate goal is to put you out of a job,
exactly right,
and Karen, give you some more free time,
there
right?
You go.
That's exactly.
I mean, that's what we're looking for in the end. When you looked at this on a long-term type basis, how do you see this? You're involved hands-on every day. Do you see us overcoming cancer in our lifetime?
We're making strides every day. But again, that's why the research funding is so crucial. But yes, we're making strides every day. More people are living longer. More people are surviving the cancers that they're diagnosed with. 100 years ago, cancer was a death sentence. When they told you had cancer, people didn't want to associate with you, and you basically, that was it. Now, if you're diagnosed, and Karen touched on it earlier, the early detection and prevention side have been huge over the last several years, and that is a big thing toward keeping people healthy in the first place, but then getting early detection, and then getting the treatment as early as possible is helping a lot of people survive cancers. And I'm an optimist, so my hope is exactly what you said, that I'm out of a job sooner rather than later, but I really do think that we're moving to that day when one day we'll have a cure for this disease.
Karen, about a minute left here. What would you say to individuals about one voice can make a difference?
One voice does make a difference. I mean, the legislation that we have introduced, we go in and we talk to our legislators about, every time I have met with our legislators in this district, I have always had a positive from them. They may have said, well, we don't have the funding. I don't want to hear that. That's not my job. Your job is to make sure that funding is there. I'm here as a resident and as a constituent. I want you to make sure that happens. And I want more voices to make those phone calls, help us out. And our legislators got put in office because we vote. And they can be taken out of office because we vote. So yes, it's very important.
Karen, we appreciate what you do for the community. And Tim, one more time quickly, where can they find out more information?
You can always go to acscan.org to get a national perspective on ACS Can. And again, if they want to look at our Facebook page, just search the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network Missouri on Facebook, and you'll find our page there.
Guys, appreciate your time. Good luck in Washington, and definitely appreciate what you do. Thanks you so much.
Thanks, Randy.
Thanks for joining us tonight here on News 20 on GTN. Hope you enjoyed the show. We'll see you tomorrow night. Have a good evening.
I remember the moment.
I'll never forget that moment.
That moment?
It was a moment that changed my life. I'd been training with my team for months, and now we had been called up for the first time. The real deal. Wildfires were getting dangerously close to homes. At that moment, I got my first taste of just how important the Guard is to my community.
See how the Guard can be an important part of your life at NationalGuard.com.
Be out there. Be out there. Be out there.
Be out there.
Time was, kids did what came naturally. Spending free time running barefoot through the grass, wading knee-deep in streams, climbing to the tallest branch. But today, American kids are more likely found texting, watching TV, or gazing at a computer screen. They spend more than 7 hours in front of electronic media. Something essential has been lost: childhood's connection to the natural world. That's why National Wildlife Federation created the Be Out There movement. Kids move indoors causes a host of problems, from obesity to ADHD. But outdoor play can go a long way to improving kids' health, body, mind, and spirit. It helps them stay fit, enhances creativity and attention spans, and could even make them better students. Do your part. Be a part of Be Out There. There's a reason why they call it the great outdoors. Learn more at beoutthere.org.